for the Susan Taylor Podcast, where we discuss the yoga of mind, medicine, and healing. Author of Feeling Good Matters, Sexual Radiance, and the Vital Energy Program, Dr. Taylor imparts authentic knowledge and practical tools that inspire, educate, and empower us to be a healing force for positive change. So join us and take your life and our planet to the next level.
Hello and welcome to Podcast 55. Confused on what to eat? Well, false prophets may be to blame. The unstated goal of most company-sponsored research studies, especially in nutrition, is to increase their net profits. It's not research science that drives the agenda, but the marketing research that hijacks our solid thinking, creating the false information that we hear so often. In today's podcast, I'd like to talk about several studies that are driven by sponsored content and why what we hear may not be true, and possibly a strategy that we can use to determine if what we hear is valid or not. Most of us are confused about what to eat and drink to provide optimal health, and I'm not surprised being given all the information and sound bites that are actually present now. I usually hear from students, from clients, from even friends, what can I eat? Everything is bad for me. There's nothing left. Well, there's a smorgasbord of diets out there, from paleo, keto, the new intermittent fasting, all having some component of truth, but not really looking at the whole picture. Keep in mind that our knowledge base right now is being delivered in sound bites, and it discards the entire picture. In fact, in my meditation trainings, we see that everybody's doing it, but in sound bites. No one's giving complete practices. Well, the same is true with nutrition. The complete picture is needed in order to really see what's going on from a biochemical, psychological balance with the whole human being. So, in some cases, this information is being delivered based on the advertising for false prophets. Not all information is wrong and incorrect, but most of it's based with, as I said, the bottom line of profit. Let me provide a few insights to how knowledge is not delivered in truth, or if delivered in truth, it's missing the rest of the information that would change the outcome of its claim. I remember buying into the hype about pomegranate juice. Pomegranates are wonderful fruits that have a lot of seeds in them, and in Ayurveda they use them for many, many health benefits. But it's been advertised as an antioxidant superfood. But when I really, looked at the research, I learned that the claims made on its health-promoting evidence from an expensive fruit drink, there was a research study done on that, it was derived mainly from a $20 million company-sponsored research. That's not to say that pomegranate is not good for you, but eating pomegranate without a lifestyle change is not going to cure health problems. Pomegranate is not the only fruit that provides phytonutrients and antioxidants. And if those of you have heard my other podcasts, we also have to look at other factors when we're considering a food or a superfood. How is it being sourced? Where is it being grown? How is it harvested? The point here is that when you look at claims and evaluate it, you have to really look if it's driven by fact or by marketing, which, as you know, marketing is designed to lure you by your senses. We have the 5 senses, 5 active, 5 cognitive, 5 action senses also. But keep in mind that the mind itself is a sense. So if it's going to lure you by telling you you're going to feel better, live longer, that's also a lure of the senses. Moving on, let's take a look at fat. Do you remember when fat was considered bad for you? I remember I bought into this, and I took fat out of my diet, getting my total cholesterol down to 84. Could you imagine 84? And at that time, I was wondering why my mind was not balanced. I was doing my PhD at the time, and I was, exercising, not eating any fat, but I doubled up on the fat-free carbohydrates. And my cholesterol actually went down to 84. Well, I bought into that. That's how I learned nutrition, by the way. I was doing my master's and my PhD, and I always experimented with diets, research. I mean, I spent my life, over 20 years, doing this. And so I'm reporting some of these things now because even I got caught into some of these types of imbalanced ways of thinking. Over the past few years, I was amazed to see a paper published in 2016 in JAMA, the Journal of American Medical Association. It was the internal medicine, where sugar was reported. They talked about sugar. It was reported that the sugar industry actually paid for scientists in the 1960s to produce research that would downplay the link between sugar and heart disease. Could you imagine that? The group's payment was not disclosed when the study was published. What a surprise. And then there was research done by someone at the University of California, San Francisco, who opened up an investigation, and they found documents that showed that a trade group called the Sugar Research Foundation, known today as the Sugar Association, paid 3 Harvard scientists, here we have Harvard in the news again, and they paid them equivalent of about $50,000 in today's dollars to be published, a 1967 review on the research on sugar, fat, and heart disease. The studies used in the review were handpicked by the Sugar Group, and the article, which was published in the prestigious New England Journal of Medicine, minimized the link between sugar and heart health and cast the problem being the role of saturated fat. Hence, there was that whole movement, get fat out of your diet. And then over the next decade, the sugar industry continued to fund similar research under the radar as to not bring attention to it. So today, the food industry continues to spend millions of dollars on nutrition research. And one study suggests as much as 90% of the studies that are funded by the food industry come up with outcomes that favor the sponsor's interest. Why not, right? If someone's paying for your study, of course you're going to want to please them, and you could move those studies and the statistics a certain way in order to come up with the outcomes that they want. As a person trained in research and who worked in psychiatry for pharma for the few years that I worked, I can say that it really does appear to be the case. Also, don't fall for the fundamental food gurus either. I mean, there's lots of food gurus out there now. Everybody's a food scientist, a food guru, a nutritionist, whatever. Just because someone claims that their mother survived because of this or that diet, everyone's using their mothers now, or they have advanced degrees, in other words, they're a doctor. There's many kinds of doctors. There's MDs, PhD, chiropractors, naturopaths. There's just many. There's online degrees for doctors. There's everything. So really discard all of that. And you have to really do your research. Even what I tell you, do your research, because I'm giving you a perception or my own perspective of what I see or deem to be true. So always do your research. But just keep in mind, it doesn't reflect on what anyone knows or not know. What you really want to look at someone's experience and if it feels right to you. So it doesn't really reflect, personal experience is very important. Yes, if you saved your mother, you saved your father, you saved your family, or you've gone through medical training, not medical training, that's all experience. And that does give you an opinion. But again, it's someone's opinion. So always do your research and think about considering where the source is coming from. Let's move on, because I would like to speak about a few more things. Something had caught my attention that was worth investigating. A few months back, it might have even been over the year now, there was a cardiologist proclaiming that lignans are associated with heart disease. And I had a lot of friends. The whole campaign was created around that statement, and many of my friends, my clients, students, anyone, they decided to go off all grains and produce anything that contains lignans. I'm going to talk more about that next week, but I do want to say the research was certainly believable, and the claims were in many cases somewhat accurate about nightshades, tomatoes, etc. But the whole picture was not there, and I'm going to talk about the whole picture next week about gut bacteria and how that changes. None of this was really reported. So consumers who are not used to the science, or people who are hearing this and not really used to the science, or are not able to interpret it, or they really don't have that interest in doing the research, because you don't have to be a scientist to do research. You could be a scientist within yourself who does your own research. You can easily be misled by the findings of the studies, especially when, as I said, they come from prestigious institutions, professional associations, or someone claiming to be a doctor, or even the celebrities. There are many kinds of doctors, as I said, many kinds of well-known, prestigious people. Just remember, do your research and don't be fooled by false prophets, Profits, as I always say. Whenever I see studies claiming benefits for a single food or claiming a superfood, we need to know about three things. And this, again, is my opinion. So I like to look at three things: whether the results are plausible from a biochemical perspective. My background is in nutritional biochemistry, so I like to look at the biology and the psychological influence, even the physiological influence of these claims. Then, was the study controlled by other lifestyle factors, including dietary, behavioral, genetic factors that could have an influence on the result? Many of my students and colleagues now, we look at some of the studies in meditation. Well, if you're including yoga with that, if you're including counseling, well, it's not the meditation that's producing the studies. Perhaps it's the additional yoga you're putting into the study, or the counseling. The same as with nutrition. Are we doing the nutrition, or is it someone who's smoking? Is it someone who's exercising daily? Is it someone who lives alone? Who are the people in the study? Living alone versus with a family is a lot different when we're talking about health and vitality with nutrition. And then the last is who sponsored it. Looking at who sponsored it will tell you if it's driven by false profits, Profits. So again, there are three factors that I look at when we're looking at claims and studies: whether the results are plausible from the biochemical perspective, whether the study is in control, there's a control part for lifestyle factors, including diets, behavioral or genetic factors that could have an influence on the result, and the third is who sponsored it. And why? Why do I have to ask those three questions? Well, we are in a period of history where the proliferation of the false prophets are there. Don't panic. We're aware. We remain calm, which means consciously aware, living in the moment. So being aware allows us to make informative decisions, because there are really many good things happening. We can focus on that, but also be aware always of what's happening around you. Increasingly, we see, actual or potential conflicts of interest. It's very prevalent right now, factors that we have found consciously or subconsciously influence the outcome of research. And they're being brought to our public attention right now. We had just recently, within this year, the CEO of the prestigious Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center had to relinquish his post in October because he failed to disclose the millions of dollars he received from pharmaceutical companies whose drugs he studied. Could you imagine that? Right? We're not surprised. We're aware of that. An investigation revealed that he had put positive spin on the results that other researchers found they wanted more data. Same thing with vaccines, by the way. All of that's the same thing is going on, not just in one area, it's going on throughout everything that we're doing. What studies get published? Remember, most negative findings never see the light of day. They never come out. I saw that in the pharma industry and psychiatry, and how their results are reported and the spin that casts negative or non-significant findings in a positive light. Hence, I didn't last for more than, I don't even know, maybe close to 3 years, because I could never do that spin. I just couldn't do it within my consciousness to do that. It just didn't exist. It's very difficult if you're aware of that, and to put a positive spin on something that you know is blatantly not correct is really a crime against the wisdom of your soul, and that creates disease. The problem is often confounded with hundreds of times when these fake study results are cited over and over again by other researchers. And I'm going to give a talk this Monday, coming up this week, the following week after this podcast. I'm going to be talking about why we can't just Google all these things and expect the truth to be there. because things are cited over and over and over again, even by researchers, the same study with false information. And that's seasoned, that it's almost like a virus being spread. It fertilizes all the other studies, and it causes just a proliferation of negative findings. 50 years of research has demonstrated, and we all know this, the influence of pharmaceutical companies on the physician's behavior. Doctors get the vacations, the pads, the pens, free meals, just all sorts of things, little trinkets with their brand name of the drug on it, to prompt doctors to ignore generic or a competitive brand. Consumers, as I said, people who are not research-driven, more than scientifically trained. I emphasize research-driven, as I just mentioned a little while ago, asking the why, what, and how, can easily be misled by the findings of studies, especially when they emanate from a celebrity or a famous person, doctors included, prestigious institutions or professional associations. I'm just repeating a little because I'm getting ready to close. Organizations and those publishing, the stories. We need, as a whole, as a consumer, to pay closer attention to both the blatant and potential conflicts of interest, as not to be caught touting science backed by these false prophets. Before closing, stay on the lookout for a new study coming out. I wanted to put this in. The Journal of Functional Food is coming out with something: vitamin-supplemented chewing gum can increase salivary and plasma levels of a panel of vitamins in healthy human participants. Very, very interesting. And they conclude that the study demonstrates potential usefulness of chewing gum as a delivery vehicle for both water and fat-soluble vitamins. I have a lot of comments about this because I always tell students who train with me in meditation, cut out chewing gum because it affects your whole parasympathetic, sympathetic nervous system by affecting the breath. That's off the subject here, but it's, chewing gum now to get our vitamins and supplements. And what I want to make a point here is, guess who funded the study? It was actually a company. It was supported by Vitaball Inc., and with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, of course. But Vitaball is a vitamin-fortified chewing gum company, and that was one of the authors on the study. So we'll probably see positive results on this study, but you're going to be able to see it and know what it's really all about. So if you really want vitamins, I would say do your research. Go to the grassroots of things, try growing your own food or buying from local conscious growers who really know how to get the vitamins back into the soil, get that shikimate pathway working again so that the vegetables will actually convert and give us what we need for our own gut microbiota. And then when the gut microbiota is okay, then we can eat the lignans that I'm going to talk about next week. Well, that brings me to the end of this episode, and contact us, or me actually, on susantaylor.org if you have any questions, comments, or feedback. And I'd like to say thank you for listening, and I'd like to thank you for your support, for, going on the YouTube and downloading from there. I always appreciate the support that I'm getting from the community. Remember, the podcast does come out every week, and if you have any questions or comments, something you might want to hear, contact us at susantaylor.org. And as always, do your research, and while you're doing your research, remain calm, consciously aware, living in the moment. Thanks again for listening, and have a great week.